Milky Way photography is possibly one of the easiest forms of astrophotography. But when you start out, your pictures look like this. So this video will show you how to get from here to here. So I recently had a weekend where all the tools that I use to forecast the weather all said it's going to be great, which almost never happens. So I pretty much had to take the opportunity to go out and shoot the night sky, despite the Milky Way only being up at about 2 to 4 a.m. in the morning. So in terms of gear, you want a reasonably wide angle lens that can capture a lot of light. For me, I've got two choices: the Tamron 17 to 28 f2.8 and the Sony FE 28mm f2. Both are weather sealed, which is nice, just in case you get some condensation and stuff on the lens. Neither are ideal for Milky Way photography, but they work well enough. The Sony lens is a lot cheaper. For this, I'm going to choose a 28mm lens. I like the perspective, and god damn, this video makes my gear look dusty. I'm going to have to clean that. I'm going to use a tripod as well. And that's pretty much all the gear you need. Camera, lens, tripod, good to go. So I'm going to go up a whole block road, which I scouted about 2 weeks ago. There's a photo from that. And here's me showing up. Late at night. It was about 2 a.m. in the morning. Grab some gear, get set up. It's alright, so we're set up in the spot I scouted out earlier. Scouting out beforehand is always a great piece of advice if you can do it. So we're going to start off shooting in about 15 seconds, ISO 1600 or so. 16 to 3200 is good. And wide open at f2. The stars in the corners of the image will be a little bit iffy, but I much prefer the light gathering capabilities of shooting the lens wide open. I'm going to use a remote trigger, which you can see in my hand there, to stop camera shake, but you can just use the timer on the camera itself. One of the trickiest things about getting everything set up at night is getting the focus right. So you want to focus in as close as possible. Here we're showing you in the editing the next day. But you want to do this out on the night itself and check the stars to make sure that they're nice and sharp. If they're got too much trailing, you need to change your exposure time. And if they're too bloated or have onion sort of style rings to them, then your focus isn't right. It can be helpful to take a test shot at very high ISO, which I did here, to check your composition. You've got your horizon nice and level, everything is where you expect it to be. You can see in this shot that we have some leading lines going in, which is the road, also the tree line on the right hand side, and there's a little bit of a fence line leading up in the left hand side. So there's a sort of a nice composition here that leads everything together in this middle of the image. However, the Milky Way isn't sort of lined up with that. We want to try and get the Milky Way probably as close as possible to where that leading line of the road, which is the main leading line, goes into the image. And we're here a little early for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to shoot some longer foreground exposures while we wait for the Milky Way to get into the right position. Over time, it's going to move up and to the left. So this you're seeing right in front of you is actually a 4-minute exposure. You see that we've got some nice detail in the ground, some good detail in the wind turbine towers. We do have a lot of hot spots that we're going to need to fix at some point. More modern cameras might be a little bit better at that. But we do have noticeable star trailing in the sky. So we can't shoot 4 minutes and expect to have stationary stars unless we've got a star tracker. I'm going to go through and just remove chromatic aberrations, do lens adjustment, uncrop, and then we'll export these ground images. I'm going to export them as a TIFF file, and then we're going to stack them and see if we can improve the quality a little bit. Now, at some point coming up, I realized I screwed up and I didn't have the camera set to have a specific white balance value, so the white balance on the images is slightly off. This isn't a big deal if you're shooting in RAW, which you should be for astrophotography, because you can just change it. But I had to go through, change it, and re-export it. I shot 2 4-minute dark exposures for the ground with the lens cap on, and we're going to try and use those to remove the hot spots as much as possible. In between those 2 4-minute exposures, I did shoot a normal exposure of the night sky just to keep an eye on how the Milky Way is moving across. So this image and this image here are the dark exposures. I'm going to export those as well, so we can use them in the stacking process. We'll do the same for the night sky images, which I shot at 10 seconds, ISO 1600 f2. And we've got a lot more darks for these. So we'll pick the good best 10 to 15 odd exposures and stack those. Okay, we're going to stack in Sequitur, which is a great tool for sort of Astro-landscape. We'll start with the ground images. So we'll pick the lights we exported. And then we'll pick the darks. We'll name an output file that the final image will be saved into. And we are going to basically just mask out the sky. I've told it to do star trails because I always think that looks pretty good on a 4-minute exposure, and it makes it much easier to identify the image later on when you re-import it back into Lightroom. So we just mask out the sky, try and leave the ground. We've got some cloud cover down there, so we don't have to be too precise on exactly where the horizon is. And there we go. We have actually quite a nice star trail image with the bit of the Milky Way in the background. So now we're going to want to stack the sky images. So we'll grab those from where we exported them. Grab the dark frames as well. Set the output file again. Now we're telling it to align stars. We want to set freeze ground. And we want to mask the sky area once more. Alright, and we're good to stack. So a couple of minutes later, and I edited out the whole boring green bar process, and we have the final image. So if we have a close-up look at this and compare it to the stacked image, there's a slight increase in image quality. Stacking has reduced the number of hotspots we're dealing with a little bit. There are still a number of hotspots left, so we're going to have to go through and manually spot fix those. And if we actually have a look at the image of the sky, we can see a noticeable decrease in noise and finer details between an unstacked image and a stacked image. So we've got lots of noise in here. And back on the stacked image, it's much cleaner. So I'm just going to go through and spot fix all these hot pixels. This will take a while, so I'll jump ahead. As you can see, I fixed a fair number of hot pixels manually. Probably more dark frames would have helped with that. But it's not the end of the world. And now we want to layer these two images together. First I'm going to brighten the sky up a little bit in the sky image. Trying to match exposures between the images to a certain extent helps with layering. we're going to select both these images, and we're going to load them as layers in Photoshop. We'll cut out the boring Photoshop loading screen. It takes a little while to deal with loading the images as layers. At least it does on my computer. People with higher end computers might find it stuff. So we have the two images loaded in as layers. Put in a layer mask on the top image. We're going to paint black on the layer mask. And replace the star trails with a nice picture of the night sky. When you get down to the horizon, you may find it hard to blend the two exposures together. So a little bit of playing around is probably going to be necessary. And sometimes you may find that things have shifted very slightly between the ground and sky exposures. If you bump the camera or the tripod or you touch things, just touching the camera to change the settings can do it sometimes. So you may need to realign the two images. There are ways to do that automatically in Photoshop, but it's just out by a little bit. You can just move one of the images and line it up. So sometimes you need to scroll in quite close and really fine tune that horizon line, which is a little boring to watch, so we'll skip that. Once you've done all this in Photoshop, I like to save a Photoshop file, so I can always go back and re-edit it from this point later. We'll go back again to the file now. We'll flatten the layers out and save it as a TIFF file. And then we'll go back and edit it in Lightroom. I just prefer the interface in Lightroom. Okay, we're back in Lightroom. We have our layered file. We've got the ground and the sky put together. So first thing I'm going to do is crop out the issues on the side. You'll be surprised at how easy it is to forget to do that at the end. I'm going to make it 16:9 on the crop because I want to use it in this video. After I finish cropping it, I'm going to play around with the image a little bit, but it's mostly me just being very fiddly, so I'm going to speed it up. You'll see a bit of playing around with the new selection tools in Lightroom, and luminance masks and sky selection and so forth. I'm just going to whip through it very, very quickly. Again, just to point out, this is just me playing around. I'm not editing expert when it comes to this kind of thing, so I tend to fiddle a fair bit. And I thought it might be interesting just to show that. It's never actually a bad thing to just play around for a little bit and see where you end up. In the end, I didn't end up very far away from the original layered image. Alright, and there we go.